Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast, where we're joined by your hosts, Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips to help you turn your NDIS business into a profitable venture. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, you've come to the right place. Let's stop surviving and start thriving.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast. I am here today with my awesome co-host Tania, and today we've got Tommy from WeFlex. Welcome, Tommy.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's so exciting to have you, Tommy. It's so great. I love seeing all of your stuff on LinkedIn and all your socials all the time. You're definitely infamous, if not famous. And yeah, it's really great. So today we're talking to you specifically around building a personal brand as well as leveraging strategic partnerships. But before we get into that, I do have your bio. So we have Tommy Trout's passion for community services ignited at the age of 16, and he has since dedicated himself to making a difference. From juvenile rehabilitation in Sweden to residential drug rehabs and mental health centres, he has tirelessly worked to address societal challenges. Witnessing the health inequality faced by individuals with disability, Tommy founded WeFlex, connecting them with mainstream health and fitness services to foster inclusivity within the industry. Personally motivated by the pursuit of a more inclusive world, he has witnessed the stigma and barriers faced by people with disability and is currently the Director of Autism Swim. Tommy is driven, excited, and committed to affecting positive change. And they're all things I didn't know about you, Tommy, so that's just absolutely awesome to read that and find out. Yeah.
I've just been bumbling around just been bumbling around, really, failing upwards, but having a great time with it. So I haven't really had a plan in my life yet.
All right. Well, that may actually lead into our first question that I've got for you today, which is actually, in regards to how you've set yourself up and, what you're doing, did you set out to build yourself a personal brand, or did that just come about sort of organically?
No, absolutely not. And so honestly, if most people want to say the word personal brand to me, I just want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. I do feel like it's a bit of a $10 way of saying reputation, and I feel like they're pretty much the same thing as well. But what really hit home for me was I was talking to somebody and they sort of said, well, like it or not, you've got a personal brand. So you can either take the reins of it or you can just let it do its own thing, but you have one, like it or not. And we all do. Like all of us have a reputation, whether you like it or not, and you get to decide if you want to influence it or not, really. And so for me, I've also learned that you've got very finite amount of control over your personal brand as well. Mm-hmm. Like, you sort of don't get to decide if people think you're an arsehole, they'll decide that. But there are things that you can influence. And so good personal brand building is understanding what you can influence. And for me, when I mentor a few people, younger people with disabilities who are advocates in the space, and I try and help them out. And what I've learned is there are 3 great rules around personal brand building, or how to ensure that you've got a good one. And there are 3 things that you can influence. And so the big ones are, and the most important one is just authenticity. I think that if you set out to build a very purposeful, specific, calculated personal brand, you're probably going to come at a bit risk of coming across as just inauthentic. It's not authentic to you. It's not natural to you. And people can just sense that. They may not be able to describe it. They may not be able to tell you why exactly, but they're just going to know that you're just not being your full self. And they're just going to get the heebie-jeebies around you. It's just a creepy feeling. When you can tell someone's being calculated or trying to come across a certain way. And it's very hard to connect humanly in a human-dominated industry that is the NDIS with someone who's trying to be somebody else or a certain version of themselves. So be authentic, be yourself, be honest, super honest, radically honest, especially about things that you don't know and about things that you don't understand, or even things that you did wrong. I'm always very proud to say when I don't understand something, I'm happy to say if I've done something wrong. And the number of times people have come back to me and said, I love that because I know I can trust you because you are actually going to tell me you don't know something. And that's just authentic. So that's the big one. And from authenticity, you need to be consistent in that as well, which is basically be reliable. And the big one is, and this is where personal branding and networking come in, is being consistent in how you treat people. So I've noticed that there are people who, there's a big wig in the room, someone who can potentially influence and change your life. And you just see people bend themselves over and backwards, just trying to fit, be what that person wants you to be, or just try and impress them. And the reason why it almost never works out is because you're not being yourself. Yeah. And you're not consistent with someone who you think is small fry, or someone who's that person, I don't know who they are. They can't influence my business or my network. And when you're inconsistent with how you treat people, that's where you lose track of your personal brand or your reputation. But also, I've always been surprised by which contact or which person is actually come back and changed things for me personally, or changed things for my business as well. I've spent a lot of time chasing big fishes that have gone nowhere. And I've had people I've just been nice to for 5 minutes, 2 months later, come back with an amazing opportunity for me because I was nice to them.
Great.
So being really consistent in how you treat people is a really great way to influence that personal brand, as long as it's consistent with who you are, with authenticity. And finally, be self-aware, aware of how you talk, how you behave, how you dress or present, just being aware of what you are as well as who you are. So as much as I would love to be a super organized person, I've accepted that I'm not. And I'm just aware of that now. And then that leads back into the authenticity piece, you know what I mean? Of just who I am, you know what I mean? And I'm consistent in that as well. So that's what I've learned around personal brand. And I've never went out to curate it. I've just tried really hard to be authentic, who I am, be myself, flaws and all, and people love it, especially the flaws. No one likes perfect.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I wrote down those as you were talking. So it's around authenticity, being radically honest, consistent, reliable, and self-aware. And I think, as an early childhood teacher, I did a lot of training around child development. And the big one for me that I love the most is called Circle of Security. I don't know if you've come across it in community services, but it's the fundamental things about how to create relationships with children, which I think apply to everyone because we're all human, is consistent, predictable, and reliable. And in everything I try to do, whether it's as a mum, a boss, a wife, and an auditor, it's how can I be consistent, predictable, and reliable? And so that doesn't mean I need to be perfect by any means, but it means if something annoys me, like at home, if you leave things in the sink with water in them, every time that upsets me, so that you can then work around that, right? It's not saying that should not annoy me. I make it really clear to my husband and my children, if you leave it there, it's going to annoy me every time, and if they're, I think when people become unpredictable is when you break relationships. So you understand if, even as an auditor, if I come in and I'm really lovely in the beginning and then I become really hard and then I'm really lovely, the inconsistency is actually what throws people and creates distrust. And in children, that's called, disorganization, attachment. But I think it's the same in adults. I think that's fundamentally how you build rapport.
Especially the NDIS is a human-centered business. At the end of the day, industry, like at the end of the day, it's all about humans. Humans drive the entire engine, and humans are wired to connect with each other. And when you've got flaws and you're honest about them, people feel safer with you because they've got them too. And when you've got a calculated personal brand, you just come across as fake, and people just don't trust it. They don't want to connect with it. But it's also very hard to be consistent in a bullshit persona as well. So you've just got to be yourself, but being self-aware is the tough one, So I'm 35, done some counselling, and I'm sort of, I'm at that point in my self-awareness journey where I'm realising that I've kind of been the culprit of everything all along with all my problems. But, you've just got to constantly be ready to be not perfect in your self-awareness. Like the team roasts me all the time on my quirks and my flaws. So my face goes rogue all the time in meetings. And they sort of love calling me that out. So now I've got to be more self-aware about my face and how I look at people when I'm there listening to them, because apparently there's just no poker face at all.
Yeah.
No.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not portraying the old RBF, you'll be okay, and your team will be fine with that. But
and look, at the end of the day, the era of the brilliant jerk is over. You can't be a prick.
Yes.
Because you're so smart anymore.
Yeah.
You're too replaceable. So I think the ultimate message and the entire thing around building a personal brand is to don't try.
Yes. Yeah. It's got to be really you, because to be honest, anything else is just a lot more work, and it's maintenance, and it's, as you say, it was curated, right? So yeah, no, I love that.
It's gross. No one likes it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because both Paul and I are building our personal brands as well. And when you said you vomit in your mouth at a personal brand, I'm so the same. And in Provider Plus, I did do videos and, I did all the webinars, and I'm fine being an educator, and I'm fine being a teacher, and I'm fine teaching people things. But this idea of being an influencer or, I do these days, Paul and I have done a few days where we hire studios and we record all our content. And when I tell a few of my friends, they're like, oh, you're an influencer. And I'm like, I'm absolutely not. That's absolutely not what I am.
Yeah.
And it does make me vomit in my mouth, even thinking about it, of like, that's not how I want people to see me. I want to share the knowledge with as many people as I can. But I don't want someone thinking that, it's never been about me. And, and even using my name in my business with Tania Gomez Consulting, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I've done it because I need it. Pardon?
Then why'd you pick it?
Well, I picked it because I've built brands for so long, and the only difference between me and the last brand that I built is me. They've got all of my IP. They're still running the business that I built from nothing. They've got everything, all my knowledge, but they don't have me. And so my only differentiating point in the market is I have the knowledge. It is me. I'm the differentiating factor. So it had to be my name. And I didn't think by creating another brand, I'd get the cut through of who wants to work with me. And the difference between what I do and what Provider Plus does is it's not a one-to-many approach. It's a one-to-one approach. And that one-to-one is that people get to work with my expertise. And so how else can I say that than work with me? And I didn't want it to be about me, and it's not about, look at me, and even having my image on everything makes me uncomfortable. But I understand that my selling point has to be, I have experience and knowledge. I have a background in this. I'm one of the most experienced people in this space. And no one can compete with that because I do have the credentials and the experience, where I felt if I was building another brand, what's the end game for that brand? It is that you get other people, and then it becomes a similar model where they're not working directly with me. And I really wanted that to be the point of difference.
I get you. I think there's a lot of people starting an NDIS business. To some extent, you're going to be part of the selling point, especially in the beginning. Like, the founder of any business is usually the biggest and also biggest asset and liability at the same time. But it's really hard, and it's very uncomfortable for people to put themselves out there from a personal branding standpoint. Imposter syndrome starts to kick in and the rest of it.
Absolutely.
It's really hard. So influencers it's a bit of a loaded word. So I've actually reclaimed the word enthusiast. So I'm just an enthusiast.
Enthusiast.
Which means that I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not even trying to change your mind. I'm just excited about what I'm doing, and I'm just going to show you what I'm doing, like a hobby.
I love that.
And you can follow along, but you cannot. Yeah. So enthusiast is the new one.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're definitely an enthusiast. I would say you're an expert, but I know it's
no, you want to do that. But I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm learning how to take compliments. I'm going to take a compliment. Thank you.
The next thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the partnerships that you build. And I think obviously your personal brand has got you to a point where you have a profile and people are aware that you exist, but you have some amazing partnerships in place. Can you tell us quickly about some of those partnerships and, how did they start? Where did they come from? And how did you create such amazing partnerships in pretty much a relatively short period of time under WeFlex?
Oh yeah, we're very lucky. We're spoiled with our friends. But so the first major one that we got was Anytime Fitness Australia. So in a nutshell, WeFlex, we connect people with disabilities to mainstream health and fitness providers. And what happened was even before we capital raised for the first time, before we even had a client, I'm sort of like, okay, I want to build out infrastructure of a network, because we wanted to use existing structure, not build gyms and recruit PTs manually. And so I essentially just went on LinkedIn and I stalked everybody who had any significant role at Anytime Fitness Australia. And at one moment, the then general manager, Rob Hale, amazing man, he actually has a son who's on the spectrum, and he actually posted that, I got the team at Anytime to do a lesson on autism. because I wanted to raise awareness. And I was like, oh, bullseye, here we go. I slid into his DMs immediately, said, buddy, if you love that, I've got a great conversation. I don't have a coffee with you right now. I've got some stuff that's going to blow your mind. We have to have a coffee. Great. And then a trick that I've always had is, you know what? I know where head office is. I'm like, you know what? I'm actually going to be right next to your office all next week anyway. So it's really easy for me to slip away. I always do that because it makes it feel like there's less emphasis on the meeting, or that I'm not driving an hour just to see them. It's like, oh, I'm going to be nearby anyway. So let's grab a coffee. And I met up with him, had a coffee, told him my story. He told me his, and he was pretty much in straight away. And when Anytime Fitness started a Anybody, Anytime inclusivity campaign a few months later, WeFlex was a pretty obvious partner for that. Yeah. But when I met with the CEO, I actually explained to them that, you know what, WeFlex, the story of WeFlex actually begins at an Anytime Fitness. That was where me and my brother Jack, that was the first gym that would take Jack on. And that was where Jack, my little brother, did his first workout. This is actually a very spiritually important place for my business. It means the world to us. And it's the only gym my brother will ever work out in. If it's not purple and doesn't have the running man, Jack won't go in. And I really gave them that sense of pride. And that really helped the conversation. Then from there, we're now national partners, and they're supporting us gain access to all 540 odd gyms across the country, 2,000 PTs. We needed a workforce, and they've got it, and so they've been a huge supporter and a huge support for us. But also when I'm going out for investment, when I'm going out in the beginning, that's a pretty handy national partnership to talk to investors about. Like, oh, we've actually got the biggest franchise in the country, all in on us. Like, we're on their website, they promote us, they love us. Very cool. Yeah. So that was a big one there, but that was just about, it was about waiting for an organic, authentic conversation to have with somebody. Yeah. And just waiting. And then when it happened, I invited myself in, but I just had an authentic chat, man to man, just about our families and all that. And the connection was real. And for them, it feels like a really natural, organic partnership as well, because they know WeFlex was born in one of their gyms, which is a cool message for their members. And we hit or supported them in their new directive. So we were helping them meet a need, which was very cool.
Brilliant.
And another one we have, which I'd want to brag about, is collaboration with PE Nation. So PE Nation are, in my mind, the hippest activewear brand in Australia. They're natives as well. And we were lucky enough to get an introduction through a friend of mine to the co-founder, Claire Tregoning, amazing woman. And I essentially said to her, look, we've got people with disabilities coming to the gym in jeans and polo shirts because they don't have activewear that they like. And PE Nation, if you look them up and you know anything about them, and of course I do my research before this sort of meeting, I understood that one of their key words is empowerment. And so I told them, we're here to empower people with disabilities to go to the gym. I mean, would you want to play soccer on a team where you're the only one not in a uniform? No. Well, that's how they feel, where they don't have activewear that fits them or suits them, right? And they were all in. And then they said that they were open to it. We signed up. We then organized co-design sessions where I was bringing people with disabilities into their head office with the co-founder, sitting down, talking about what their needs are, what their experiences are. And I'm just watching this co-founder get it in a huge way, become completely moved, completely on mission. And she's now the biggest advocate we've got at the moment. And she's driving this amazing product range that's going to be coming out one day that's going to be able to meet the needs of people with disability. But it's going to be cool, really awesome activewear. But she's in a room hearing from a young girl that there are no activewear tops for her in a wheelchair, and she has to make her own using several pieces of clothing and sewing it together.
Wow.
Right? And so giving her access to the user and that mission moment of actually spending time really unpacking the project, not trying to sell her on revenue, not trying to sell her on how cool it's going to make her look, but just letting her hear firsthand what impact it's going to have on people's lives. It just resonated hard, and she's a great friend of mine, and we're doing cool stuff together.
That's really awesome.
And I think that's really what it's about, right? It's really about finding people who align with your values and figuring out how you fit together to both meet the goals that you have in different ways.
More or less, yeah. You should always you always want to do your research, but don't let that sort of guide or dictate the conversation or what it is. You've got to be really open-minded when you meet them on what they are. But, you've also got to trust, like sometimes you talk to people in these big brands, really important people, fancy people, famous people, whatever, and you just don't think that they would be interested in things, and you don't give them an opportunity, and you should. And they'll select in or out. But if you find mission alignment, it's usually the best place to start. And then look for the win-win-win, where for us, like our brand will be on the cool clothing. They're being able to put out amazing clothes for a new market, and people with disabilities have a new range to choose from. Everyone wins. It's awesome.
I think a key takeaway there for our listeners will be the fact that you went out and actually just met a lot of people, and you were available, like you were connected with people online to see what they were doing. Like, for instance, with Anytime, you saw what they were doing. You go, hey, I could be connected with that. I could do something in that space. But then also having, to be honest, just the guts to actually make that first contact and say, I think there's something that I would like to just have a chat with you, because what you do aligns with what I want to do. And then, then it's not a pitch. It's let's have a conversation. Right.
So, but what I'd say though, what I've learned, and the advice I'd give is actually a bit different to what I've done, is one, I would actually say that partnerships don't mean an awful lot. Like 80% of the partnerships I created have died within 6 to 12 months. Because, and so for me in the very beginning, it was like, it's a scale business. I want a lot of stuff. I want to go after the biggest whales in the ocean because that's the fun part. I want to get after it. But when you're a tiny little business going after a big one, you're not a priority for them, and you never will be. All you're getting is a logo, and no one cares about the logo after all. No one goes on a website and sees a logo and then gives you their business, or very rarely will they do that. It's actually a bit of a waste of time. All you're going to do is jump through a lot of hoops for this company to decide if they want to deal with you or not in months' time. But you're never going to be a priority. The advice I'd give is to actually find smaller brands your size and play with them. And the ones that are more passionate and keen, and play with people your own size in your own play pit, right? And work with them, because you just spend a lot of time. You waste a lot of time. And we haven't we've had massive partnerships that made us no money. We're actually probably negative. And so it's really attractive. It's really fun. It's not going to solve your business at all.
But isn't it also a numbers game as well? Because I've had lots of partnerships, and you just need one or two to work. And so having 80 or however many, having a lot of partnerships, you're not expecting something to come from all of them, but having their bravery to go and forge them in case something happens, in case the stars are aligned. Because for me, it's kind of like the whole meaning of luck. For me, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? And so if you're with Anytime Fitness, you were prepared and ready, and it was the right moment, and it came together. But if you'd met them a year earlier, nothing would have happened. And if you weren't ready and you hadn't prepared, it wouldn't have happened. So I kind of feel like you still need to give it a go. And if it doesn't happen, then that just wasn't meant to be. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to create these partnerships, because you also don't know when they're going to come back up, and meeting that person could be pivotal for something else in the future that you don't even know yet.
Oh, for sure. I think to some extent it's about time management, because it's, doing it 100 times, there's a lot of work with each. It may not be, you may take you away from the core function of your business, but you see an opportunity, definitely take it, and, it's one thing I've gotten really good at is sliding into people's DMs in LinkedIn. And just getting a coffee out of them. But so the rule that I had, so one thing that really helped me is, in a previous life, I used to build suicide prevention charities in the outback of Australia, and they would basically airdrop me into remote communities, like Indigenous communities and rural communities, and I'd know nobody. And my job was, I have to build a suicide prevention charity in this outback town, and no one knows me. And the rule that we had internally was, it takes you about 50 coffees to build something. And what that meant is that I don't have to meet everybody in town. I just have to meet one person in town. And he'll introduce me to somebody else, and then that's the second coffee. And then they'll introduce me to somebody. And that's how you do that. And from a partnerships perspective, the best way to do that is to play the 50 coffees game, where you just meet with people and you put what you're doing in front of them, not attached to it. If anything, you encourage them to look at flaws or problems of what you're trying to solve, get them engaged, and they'll introduce you to people. And introductions like that are normally the best way to get those partnerships going. Because it's people always respond better when it's someone I know telling me I should meet somebody.
Yeah.
So if you want to start building partnerships and if you want to start building a network where you don't know if it's going to be in handy now or it might be just a good play for down the road, I'd encourage you just to have 50 coffees, meet with people. And again, be consistent in how you come across, be authentic in how you come across, be self-aware of how you're behaving at that coffee date, but don't leave until you get another coffee one. And before you know it, you've had 50 and you'd be surprised how many of those come back in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year.
Yeah, cool.
50 coffees.
That's great advice.
Hey, look, we often also talk about, having a really good idea of who you serve and how you serve them, but also, who you don't, who you are specifically set up to bring fantastic service to and what that point of difference is. What was that process to define your market and niche? Like, to give our listeners a bit of an idea of how you came to where you found exactly who you wanted to work with.
Sure. So the decision we've made, it's also what really important to us is we made the decision to build a brand with the community or with people with a disability and not for them. I think one thing that happens a lot, especially with the older, more archaic structures and organizations in this industry, is that they still talk about the customer and not to the customer. At the end of the day, the person with a disability is the customer and you need to talk directly to them. And I don't think a lot of brands do that even now. The number of times I go to expos and I still see people talk about people with disabilities at the expo when they should be talking directly to them in their marketing and how they approach stuff. So one thing that we always did was we co-designed everything. So when we did our branding, we had people with disabilities in the room giving their opinions on how they want to be marketed to. Every product we designed, we have people with disabilities doing that with us. So the customer has been on the journey with us, building the brand with us from the very beginning. And it's great because we're talking to them. And one thing that we wanted to do though was, and one thing that we heard, especially from a branding perspective, one thing that we learned is they don't want a brand that is lame or condescending or has the word ability in it. It's just signpost. I'm sorry, but I'm so over ability now. I can't handle it. I hate it. Or the word care. Like there's just no originality. Like the marketing is so bland in this industry. And so when we set out, we were told by the community, like, can you give us something we're proud to wear, something that's cool, something that doesn't even have anything to do with with disability? Like, why does that have to be the defining feature of the brand? Yeah. And so we chose WeFlex, inclusive of everybody and flex, right? Which is showing off and showing what you can do, right? So when we built WeFlex, we were like, we want a brand that people are proud to rep. And it's for them. It's the fitness brand for people with disabilities, built by people with disabilities, understood and driven, with the insight provided by people with disabilities. Brilliant. So bring them on the journey, bring them in, talk directly to them. And parents aren't going to be upset that you're not talking to them because they're talking to their kid. They're going to be like, oh, great, that's still for my kid. Like they can put two and two together. But there's a lot of dignity there that they're going to appreciate. It's one thing that we learn a lot of. And just challenge yourself with your marketing and your branding and your name. Just give them a little bit more benefit of the doubt in terms of what they can understand and what brands they want to rep.
And that works perfectly for your customer, right? So from just what you've said, your customer then is young, they're young and able, and they're wanting to get fit. So you figured out who that is. I guess that messaging would be different. I mean, I don't know if anyone likes ability and care in, they're overused, but like, I think that messaging might be different if you were working with, people with early onset dementia, or, if you were working with a different niche, your messaging and branding would need to be different. But you've kind of found, at least from my perspective, it seems you found the right people that you can communicate with and really care about, and you know how to talk to them and how to support them. And that's what makes your business a success.
Absolutely. And regardless of what your business is, regardless of your target market, just engage directly with them. Make them have a quota system in your coffees. Like half of my coffees were with people with disabilities, talking to them very, very bluntly about the problem we're trying to solve. And I'd encourage you to do the same. Talk to your customer over and over again, and they're going to identify themselves, and you're going to pick up on the type of conversations you're having. So what we learned is that, sometimes language is can be a bit of a hindrance in this, right? Because people can be very scared to talk about disability quite openly, and one time at a coffee, I actually used the word differently able. I just got, I almost had water thrown in my face for saying it. Like, you can say disability. And so those nuances as well are really important. And you get to speak with confidence, and you're like, well, the community are informing us, and they're along on the journey. So just talk to them, make them the biggest, most important stakeholder, and then make a product for them. For sure.
I'm writing that down. That's like quotable.
Yeah.
So my next for you was around, what advice would you give to other providers, maybe newer providers who were trying to find how to differentiate themselves, where they fit in the market? Because in some areas it can be saturated. And I mean, maybe not in your specific space, but you seem to be prolific with figuring out where is the niche, where is the opportunity, and how to brand that in a way that cuts through.
It's hard. At the moment, we're one of a kind at the moment. I certainly hope more people do what we do, because I want to solve a problem. But yeah, it's sometimes can be quite hard. The advice that I had, and the way that I've always gone about it, is that niche isn't enough. So looking at WeFlex, right? Disability is a niche, but a lot of people in disability. Fitness is a niche, but a lot of people in fitness. Disability fitness, niche, nothing. Straight off a cliff, nothing there, right? So if you can, one way or one potential way to differentiate yourself is to consider a niche. So what is another way that you can niche? So I was talking to somebody, they want to set up a plan management company that only works with older women, because there's very unique needs around that. And that's a really cool way to differentiate yourself, because if you have someone who's looking after somebody who's an older woman, that's a really cool thing to see plastered as like, we are specialists, or women in general, or younger people, or whatever. And you can start to niche that side of things and be like, oh, wow, they really specialize in something there. And there's still decent sized markets, and you can always differentiate differently later, but you want that cut through. Another really great way to find that differentiation is through storytelling. At the end of the day, people choose with emotion and they justify with logic.
Yes.
Right? So if you give them an emotional reason to connect to your brand and you as a founder and your why and everything, that's usually setting yourself up to succeed pretty early on. So for me, even though I'm a bit sick of doing it, I tell my story when I go out to events, and I explain that, look, I'm the last guy in the world that would have started a business, the last guy in the world that should start a business, but I'm doing it anyway because I love my brother and there was no solution out there for him. And when people hear that, they're like, you know what, like, this is a business born in love. That's a really cool thing. And I feel the same way about my family. And then they actually look into the business and they see that everything makes sense and it all works, and then the logic takes over and they can justify the purchase. So storytelling, we've all got one. No one's here for the money. You're clearly here because you want to impact the world and make it better and support people with disabilities. What's your why? Tell your story. Get really good at telling your story. Practice it over and over again. And you can do that with your 50 coffees. As long as your story is authentic, you're consistent in how you talk about it, and you tell it through the lens of self-awareness, not through the lens of I'm perfect, I'm a hero, I'm great, here's why I'm so amazing, but a story where you take L's, you lose, you're good, this happens, that happens, a real hero's journey, talking about the brand and how you came about to be who you are. People will resonate with that and they'll want to do business with you because of it. Storytelling is still one of the most primal forms of communication. If you know your story, I think you can get real cut through.
Brilliant.
And networking as well.
Well, look, obviously, you've gotten your story out there quite a bit. What sort of channels does WeFlex use to actually get out there? Where can we find you?
So at the moment, we're sort of just your pretty standard channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok as well. We're currently working on a YouTube strategy for more longer format sort of stuff, which we're excited for. So yeah, we sort of just do the basic stuff, and we're always refining what we post, how we post it. We've gone through quite a few different style guide iterations and how we want to come across. But yeah, just your standard social profiles at the moment, and growing steadily, which is great. For some reason, LinkedIn's our biggest platform at the moment, which makes no sense to me, but whatever.
It breeds connection with people who are interested in connecting.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This question is probably going to make you throw up in your mouth just a little bit, but I want to throw it out there anyway, right? Could you quantify a return on investment for your, and I'll say reputation, but even those partnerships that you're developing at the moment? Yeah, there it is. Right?
So no, I can't.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, look, I'm sure somebody could, but I'm not the guy to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not literate enough and I'm not savvy enough. But at the moment, look, like I'm not an influencer, and Instagram followers don't mean anything. Facebook followers don't mean an awful lot either. And I think if you're measuring your success in personal brand through follower accounts, you're in for a really rough ride. And also you're just not going to get anywhere. At the end of the day, nothing is more important. So I'd say return on investment from my social media stuff is 0. Return on investment from my coffee dates is probably quite high.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's what I think people need to understand.
All the partnerships.
Yeah.
All the partnerships, all the investment, all of that has come on the back of me having coffees with people and meeting them. But it's none of it was sort of on purpose. It was just who I was introduced to. And then when I met them, I was authentic, consistent, and self-aware about what I was trying to do and who I am in that equation, and gave people permission to also come into the business. When you're networking, you have to be married to the goal, married to the mission, not married to the means, and be willing to move and change how you go about things to accommodate new opportunities that come in.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, being flexible there is going to give you a lot more options, because other people may even have options of how you could do things, input on things that could be beneficial to you that you haven't even thought of. And from those coffee catch-ups, right?
Yeah. But selling the notion of personal brand to the listeners is absolutely worthwhile to be, again, really mindful of how you come across your personal brand or your reputation. Yep. The best things you can do are, like I said, try and just be aware, consistent, and authentic. But again, it is absolutely worthwhile really connecting with people and actually putting in effort and building your networks up, because the number of times I have had huge wins, different types of wins, but very different, but very big wins come through because I had a coffee with someone 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago. Huge. It is absolutely worthwhile, and lean into your personal brand as well. So one thing that I seem to have a reputation for is that I'm a very engaging public speaker when I go and do events, right? Because when I talk about disability, I'm obviously very enthusiastic, but I'm also very confident in talking very bluntly and very directly about it as well. I don't dance around stuff, and I'm not safe.
Awesome.
And because of that, I was active. The Peak Body for Fitness took me on a keynote tour around the country, talking at universities and to fitness professionals, industry leaders in all the states. And they gave me the keynote when there were doctors on the list who got micro talks. And if that's not the power of personal brand, I don't know what is.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So I've learned so much from you today, Tommy. Talking to you is always such a delight. I think we've been in the same circles for many years and we've worked together a few times, but it's just every time I learn so much from you, and it's so fun to work with you and to talk to you. So thank you so much. My summary of what I've learned today, is when it comes to personal brand, I have got authentic, consistent, reliable, and self-aware as the most important parts. I wrote down around partnerships that it's about being authentic, waiting for the right opportunity, being brave, looking for the win-win-win, and your 50 coffees approach. I've got that when you're choosing your market or your niche, that you need to be talking directly to them, co-designing and making a product for them specifically. And with them, yep. And I've got your advice around trying to find their place would be considering a niche, really thinking about storytelling and that idea of they choose with emotion but justify with logic. And lastly, I wrote down my nugget around your return on investment with personal brand is about leaning into it and using your network as much as you can. So I don't know, is there anything that I missed, any important piece that you think that you'd like to add to my summary?
You're making me sound a lot more intelligent than I think I'm coming across as. So that's awesome. I think the big one for me leading into personal brand is one thing that a great conversation I had with a past mentor. It was like, stop trying to spend all your energy fixing your flaws. Just think about your strengths and lean into those and just supercharge them and find people who are good at what you're not good at. And so when it comes to your personal brand, don't try and create super well-rounded. You're going to be bad at things. And instead of just trying to fix everything, lean into what you're really good at, the 3 key parts of it that define you and that are authentic to you, and just supercharge them. For me, I'm just a big, loud, enthusiastic idiot who's really fun to have coffee with and indoctrinate people into the mission of WeFlex. And that seems to be going well for us so far.
Brilliant.
I love it.
I think I'm going to need to be one of those 50 coffees pretty soon. I'll be heading over there.
Good man. Proud to be one of those coffees.
Brilliant. Hey, thank you so much today, mate. I think that our listeners have got some really good takeaways and some things to really probably go and have a think about. Where they're putting their time, their effort. Is it into all the bells and whistles, or is it actually into connecting with the people that they want to serve and finding out what they really need? And I really think that's a really important place for them to play.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah. 100%. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Next week on our podcast, we're actually going to be chatting through a case study of one of the people I've worked with who actually found their niche and ran with it and built a business to take on the big boys pretty quickly within the space of 12 months because he was so passionate about that really niche that he was serving and serving that incredibly well. So we're going to have a look at that next week on our podcast. But for now, from myself, Tania and Tommy, thanks so much and goodbye.
See you later. Thanks, Tommy.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast with Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. We hope you found today's episode informative and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating, and share it with others who could benefit from our insights. Until next time, keep thriving.